from the very beginning that when it comes to designing my book's cover, I want to have characters on it. There are so many covers with no characters at all, and that's not necessarily awful, but still pretty boring in my opinion. So today we're going to cover all steps of the process. Get it? Cover. Anyway, choosing the right cover size, coming up with a suitable idea, sketching everything out, determining the best colors, rendering, etc. In case you are interested in a particular step of the process, feel free to use the timestamps to move to any part of this video and watch that first. In case you find the video interesting and or useful, please make sure to leave a comment and like it. Maybe even subscribe to watch more videos like this one. Thanks, and let's get started. Before we even get to planning out the drawing for the cover, it's very important to determine your canvas's size. I can't give any precise numbers that would automatically suit everyone, but I can share a couple of tips on the topic. First of all, take into consideration whether you are planning to possibly print out your book or just post it online. For online copies, as far as I understand, one just needs to have the front of the cover. If you do want to have a physical copy though, the back is important too. In my case, I was initially determined to make physical copies, which is why there are two sides to my cover, and even though now I am mostly focused on the digital release, it's still nice to have both. It gives a clearer picture. You don't have to have it though. The bigger the resolution and size, the better. You might get away with scaling the picture down here and there, but sizing it up is a different story. The quality is going to be trashed. So my resolution is 300 ppi, the size is 4902 to 2835. The size in particular is a bit weird, but it wasn't always like this. Normally I go with 3840 to 2160, or if I need it to be square, I do 2048 to 2048. This other size was made based on what the printing agency I talked to suggested that I should use considering the size of my book. I suppose it could be a little less wide, but they didn't have proper equipment to make that happen. I didn't mind though. The copy I ended up printing was a trial one anyway, mostly created so that my brother could read a physical copy. Don't mind the cover. I printed back when the cover wasn't finished yet, and as I said, it was just a test. Whatever size you end up going with, keep in mind that the edges are going to get cut when the cover is going to be folded, and if you are going to have a print run, there is a chance you might have a QR code on the book, usually on the back in the corner. I must also say that it is much more convenient to use centimeters instead of pixels when setting your canvas size for something like this, mostly because all of the website and printing establishments use centimeters and millimeters to tell how big a cover is. With all that said, to find out the size of your particular cover, you can use special measuring websites and or ask the place where you're planning to print your stuff when it comes to physical copies. When it comes to digital covers, the size and measurements are not as crucial, but you can still look them up on the platforms you're planning to publish at. With all this boring measuring stuff out of the way, that honestly gave me quite a headache as I wanted everything to turn out right, let's talk about something truly interesting, the idea behind this piece. So, since I was planning to add characters, I needed to decide who exactly they were going to be. Considering it's just the first tome's cover, I decided to go with the two main characters we start with, Jaeger and Ella. Since the first chapter is Jaeger's and he plays quite an important role in the story, though I can't clarify how exactly, it was decided to have him on the front side of the cover. The second chapter is Ella's, and she's one of the main driving forces in the first half of the story, which is why she was chosen to be on the back. To keep this video structured, let's talk about the front part first and then move on to the back. Jaeger is standing at the edge of his own private island, looking at the red car flying away. In short, that's what I decided to have at the front. There are multiple reasons for this choice, some are plot related, some are for aesthetic purposes. First and foremost, I wanted this cover to demonstrate some of the cool things one can expect to read about in this book. In this case, the fact that the whole world is floating and the cars here are flying too. Both of these facts are not just visually pleasing, but also give a bit of environmental context to the reader before they even open the book. This is why this part of the cover doesn't depict the garden, a small portion of which we see in the corners, or the inside of Jaeger's house. They are okay in their own way, but they can't tell new people anything of substance, and also it probably wouldn't have looked as cool. The island Yeager is standing on, as I've mentioned, is his own private island number 89. It is his home that he's spent a lot of time at. It's not just a fact, it's actually very much relevant to his character, as one of Yeager's main characteristics is him purposefully avoiding communication with people, most of the time staying at home doing his own thing. It might not be his dream lifestyle, but one he figured was better in his circumstances. New country, new home, new people, and all alone. That's quite hard to overcome when you've been betrayed before. In order to show that it's a pear garden, we see some of the pears hanging from branches, and there are also some random wildflowers at the bottom to make the island floor a little more interesting than what it might have looked without them. Not these flowers, but ones of similar nature are actually mentioned in the text in the book, which says, Yeager lived alone on the relatively small floating island number 89. About 22,000 square meters of space fit his one-story house, a pear garden behind it, which took about half the area, and even a lake easily accessible through a glass veranda. The perimeter of the island was distinguished by a line of wildflowers. While Yeager didn't know much about flowers, he liked the presence of these plants. They stretched along the edge of the island like a cute, jagged fence, creating a sense of wild comfort. Beyond them was nothing but emptiness. One little thing, which is more so a fun fact than anything of relevance, is that one of the flowers has a little smile on its middle yellow part. It's not extremely obvious, but if you see it once, you can't unsee it. It was an intentional choice, partially incentivized by my brother Artyom because of this old drawing of mine from 6 years ago or so. I drew people playing Hunger Games, but in place of participants, there was me, a couple of randoms, but mostly different content creators. What I mentioned it for is the flower though. Since I was kind enough to write its name right above it in my speed paint, I still know that its name is Stefan. Wait, I already have a character called Stefan. We will talk about that Stefan later in another video. What is important now is that since these flowers had a similar shape to that old one, it felt right to put a little Easter egg in here. Well, one more part is the red car. It's flying away in the background, and it is what disturbed Yeager in his peaceful life. Apart from it being drawn here to demonstrate what kind of transport people use in this world, its appearance serves an important plot purpose. It brought a person from the capital who suggested Yeager to participate in a mission he hadn't been aware of until then. That person merely flew away afterwards, leaving Yeager contemplating if it was actually worth it. I would like to discuss the car a little more here, because despite me always saying that I'm ready to draw nearly anything as long as it's safe for work, I'm not a fan of mechanical stuff, I gotta admit. It looks really cool when done well, and I love when I do it right, but it's also just so tedious. This car was no exception. For some reason I decided to flex and turn it sideways, which made me research what real cars look like at the bottom, and on top of that, kind of funny, I just said at the bottom and now I go on top of that. On top of that, the cars in this world are supposed to fly, at least most of them, which is why, apart from basic car construction, I had to look up some references of what thrusters and propellers looked like. In the end, I'm especially proud of the back of the car. Something about the way it's drawn turned out very cool, but I also do think the car as a whole does look realistic despite the added fictional elements. The logic behind these cars, since we're talking about them anyway, is that they get off the ground thanks to the propellers and then move forward and backwards, mostly using thrusters. In my Learning to Live animation, the buses don't have propellers, but thrusters at the bottom. That I can explain by the fact that buses are naturally much heavier and thus require more power to get off the ground. So yeah. On the topic of flying, I would like to mention how choosing the right sky color was a whole different story. My options were ranging from normal day sky to pinkish morning sky, but I ended up going with the orangey yellow morning sky. I think it ended up looking both beautiful and a bit dramatic. I especially adore the cloud floor below the islands. It looks very fluffy and very big, endless even. Now, let's move on to the backside. Eleanor appears, as I mentioned, in the second chapter. She's a psychologist, and the first location we see her at is her office. Similarly to Yeager, I wanted to depict more of the city rather than the office, which, frankly speaking, we are not gonna see much of anyway. The city, the capital at that, is a different story. Besides, it creates this nice contrast to the rural vibes we are already getting from Yeager's part of the cover. In terms of furniture, there is just one thing, the armchair, and a plushie well on top of it. It's not a random toy, but rather a very important toy companion for Ella. The brother whose death she's planning on investigating is the one who had won it for her on her birthday in an amusement park. As such, Eleanor keeps the well around as one of the reminders about her brother. Speaking of such reminders, as I was drawing this piece, I nearly forgot Eleanor's glove. But, it's one thing I almost forgot to draw the glove. When I did remember about it, I ended up drawing it on the wrong hand and had to redraw it to match the book's descriptions, which say Ella always has her glove specifically on her right hand, and I do mean just one glove. As is visible here, thanks to the way Ella's hand is positioned, this glove is a tool, not just a piece of fabric. She can have maps installed on it, she can make phone calls with it, and customize it to her liking to a certain extent. It was also her brother's present, his first little invention that he had made with Ella in mind. That's one of the reasons she still keeps it, apart from it just being very useful. The city outside is not much to brag about, I'm just glad it looks pretty believable. Tara in general, capital included, are quite nature-focused, so there are lots of plants visible behind windows. What's more, there are white ropes going from one window to the other where citizens can dry their clothes or, which is what they do more often, hang their carpets. Ella's room is purposefully dim and dark to convey her overall negative emotional state, while the outside is bright and hopeful. Together, the two parts form a complete piece where Elle and Yeager are seemingly looking at each other through kilometers of distance between them. At the very end, as you can see, I was trying to make sure the characters' heights were actually correct. By that point, I had almost all of the important characters drawn, let alone the main characters, so I managed to do that relatively easily. In fact, what actually ended up happening is that their height was correct. What wasn't correct was the shape and position of Ella's head. It was too elongated, I guess you could say, for its own good, which made it seem like she's that much taller than Yeager and just generally made her look a little weird. But after these finishing touches, the overall picture, I feel like, finally came together. At the end of the day, this piece seems to be the heaviest one I've drawn so far. It has 272 layers and weighs 271 megabytes compared to 8 to 140 megabytes my drawings average at. Drawing cities, houses, and other places in the distance was somewhat of a challenge. I'm still figuring out what is the best way to approach structures like this, especially when they are far away. My inner perfectionist wants to draw them in detail, while my realist side yells at me saying it's unreasonable because, firstly, no one's gonna look at everything so attentively, and secondly, you can't realistically see any details in the distance, so it just doesn't make sense. Anyway, towards the end, my main issue was adding the name of the book, my name, and the name of the book on the book's spine. I had found the font that I liked, but it still needed some adjustments to make it look the way I wanted it to. The colors are orange and blue, corresponding with Yeager and Ella's main colors. My name is written much more modestly below the name of the book with the background that looks like a little cloud. And the spine's color is not exactly the prettiest. I don't know if there's anything else I could do with it, but at least it does connect the two pictures together relatively well. Well, now I guess that's all I wanted to show you. There might be some minor tweaks before the final release, but overall, that's the way my book's cover looks now. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!